Welcome to the highlights of episode number 137 with Dr. Mark Hyman. Some of my favorite parts of this episode were when he shares with us exactly what to eat and why there is so much confusion out there. I also love the concept of the pegan diet, which he talks about and I found very funny, and how he so elegantly debunks a lot of the food myths around dairy, gluten, grains, and cholesterol, and also animal products. But there is so much more wisdom, knowledge, and inspiration that you get in the full episode. So, to listen to the full podcast and get all the info in the show notes, head on over to melissaambrosini.com/137 right now. Welcome, Mark. It is so great to have you on the show. Most people have absolutely no idea what to eat for health and well-being. And most people are confused by conflicting nutritional research and different opinions and opposing dietary philosophies out there. So firstly, why are we so confused? How did we get so confused?
Well, I think the truth is that it's not by accident that we've been confused. There's a number of things that are happening that have to do with the food industry's undue influence on our food supply, our food policy, and our food itself. And, a number of things that happen. One, food industry has corrupted nutrition science to confuse the field and create confusion so that we don't have firm policies that declare X or this Y bad. For example, soda industry funds studies through the American Beverage Association on soda, and guess what? It's not harmful. The Dairy Council funds studies on milk. Guess what? It's nature's superfood. Neither of those are true, but that's how the science gets confused. Also, they are strictly opposed to policies that would improve the education of consumers. For example, the dietary guidelines in the U.S., which are often influenced from the industry that corrupts the dietary guidelines process, again, telling us to drink 3 glasses of milk a day where there's no evidence for that, and ignores huge amounts of evidence to the contrary around various things like sugar and carbohydrates as a driver of obesity and disease. We also have food policies from the government that are controlled in part by the food industry, which has billions of dollars of lobby money. For example, just the Farm Bill alone, which governs 80% of which is food stamps, which is food assistance to the poor, is $500 million is spent on that Farm Bill by 600 lobbyists to shape the Farm Bill so that we don't cut benefits for soda. Why are we paying $7 billion a year for soda with food stamps? Why are we paying probably 70 to 80% of the food that's bought with food stamps is disease-producing food? Why do we then subsidize those disease-producing foods with our food policies that support commodity agriculture that grow corn, wheat, and soy that are turned into junk food? There's all these conflicting policies.
And for a lot of people, they might think, well, why does food actually matter? Like if I don't have a health issue on the surface, as long as we are getting enough to stay healthy and stay in a healthy weight, as long as we enjoy the food we eat, does it really matter? Like I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, it doesn't really matter. It won't hurt. But how important actually is the food?
It's extremely important. I think most people think that if they're not fat, they're fine. But there's a lot more to being healthy than being thin. In fact, there are many people who are called skinny fat. They're fat on the inside and not on the outside, or skinny fat. And that's a big issue because we have people who really are metabolically obese without necessarily having the problem of having the obesity, but metabolically they're sick. And it also can lead to autoimmune disease and gut issues and much, much more.
Now, you say food is medicine. What do you mean by that?
Well, we think of food as calories, right? Which is essentially calories that will fuel our energy needs. But what we know is that food is so much more than that it's actually information. It's like instructions that is hugely powerful in driving our gene expression, our hormones, our immune system, our gut microbiome, pretty much everything that matters in our biology, our hormones, all driven by this incredible thing that we do every day, which is consume pounds of food. It's the most important thing we do every day to regulate our biology, our health, our well-being. And most people don't connect the dots between what they eat and how they feel. And think if they're only eating enough food, it's okay. But they don't realize that the quality of their energy, their brain function. They don't even know, for example, how actually it's affecting them because they've never changed their diet to eat a healthy way to change their brain chemistry, change their hormones and everything else.
Mm. So, what do we eat? I want everyone listening to walk away from this episode not more confused or overwhelmed or stressed out. Tell us, what do we eat?
Well, I wrote a whole book called Food, What the Heck Should I Eat, which is really about this. And I go through every category of food, whether it's meat, fish, poultry, whether it's vegetables, fruit, nuts and seeds, beans, grains. And I talk about what does the science show? What do we know? What do we don't know? What are we confused about? And from there, I kind of create a summary of what are the things in each area you should know. For example, if you're going to eat meat, does the science show that meat causes disease? And what is the quality of the science? And how do we know what we know? And is it reliable? And what is the contradictory science? Because if you listen to, for example, sort of vegan movies and so forth, it paints a pretty horrible picture of what's actually happening. And it's based on a lot of pretty crummy science or twisted science or cherry-picked science. And we know, for example, that, as a species, we've been consuming meat for 8 million years. And, this is what our bodies have designed to run on, but not what we're eating today, which is factory farm meat. So yes, we should not be eating factory farm meat. It's bad for the planet, bad for the environment, bad for our health.
In terms of the paleo movement and the paleo community, they think that we should definitely be eating like our ancestors and avoiding the grains and the beans and the dairy and eat more like cavemen. Now, what is the case for and against this grains and beans debacle?
Yeah, so, I write a lot about this. I jokingly called what I do a pegan diet, which is essentially paleo vegan. And it was kind of a joke because I was sitting on a panel with a friend of mine who was a cardiologist who was a extreme vegan, and then another doctor who was a paleo doc, and they were fighting. And I just thought this was silly. And then I began to sort of realize, what are the common principles? In fact, they have more in common with each other than with traditional ways of eating. For example, they both agree that we should be eating a plant-rich diet. They both agree we should be eating lots of nuts and seeds. They both agree we should be eating lots of good fats. They both agree. There's some low-fat vegans, but they're far and few between. They both agree that we should not be eating dairy. They both agree that we should be eating foods that are sustainable and that restore the planet. They both agree we shouldn't be eating foods that are full of hormones, antibiotics, pesticides, GMO. They both agree we shouldn't be eating junk food and processed food. They both agree that we shouldn't be eating a high glycemic starch diet. So these are really common things that they're agreeing on that are foundational principles for a healthy diet. And in fact, the only things they disagree on are meat, animal foods, and grains and beans. And that's pretty much it.
I think it's a shame that if on the surface, even though, like I said before, there may not be any physical health degenerative signs, like you might not have asthma or you might not have eczema, which is, usually the first start of inflammation in the body. And often it takes people getting to these really chronic stages before they listen up and look. And I don't want it to get to that place for people. It's, these little things that we do each day. It's the gluten every day. It's the commercial dairy every day. It's the refined sugar every day that add up and add up and add up. And I just really want everyone listening to be mindful of what you're doing daily, because it's the little things that you do each day that add up to big results or big consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge issue. And I think it's not the one little thing you have here or there. It's just the volume. The average American has about 3/4 of a pound of flour and sugar every single day. Right? Those are pharmacologic doses.
And for years, we were told not to eat cholesterol and avoid eggs at all costs, and that eating cholesterol was bad for your heart. But the latest government dietary guidelines overturned 35 years of dietary recommendations to cut fat and cholesterol. Like, how did that happen?
That is a great question. What happened was that we had a theory that was unchallenged, which is that dietary cholesterol causes heart disease, because we know that cholesterol causes heart disease. So therefore, dietary cholesterol should cause heart disease. Well, it was never proven, and it was never studied carefully. And when it was studied, it was found to not be an issue. I think, we have to just be very careful and look at the data and not base it on assumptions. We think cholesterol is terrible, but in fact, it may not be as the evil we thought it was in terms of causing heart disease. It's only when your cholesterol is oxidized or when it's damaged by the oxidation process that happens through inflammation. So that's really, really important to understand. It's not about the cholesterol itself.
So, can you talk to us about dairy? Give us the truth about dairy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the truth about dairy is that we've believed forever that it was not something we should avoid at all, that we should be eating a lot of it, and that we should be eating 3 glasses a day of milk. And the evidence just isn't there. I think if you really look carefully at the evidence, a lot of it's been propaganda from the food industry. In fact, the Dairy Council partnered with the government to create these got milk ads, which made all kinds of false claims. And then the Federal Trade Commission, which is our governing body over the airwaves, said this is not okay. You don't have the data to make these claims, and you're making false claims about the benefits of milk. And they had them take off the ads from the television. So I think we really, really kind of have to rethink our whole view here. That we know from the data that it may increase the risk of fractures, that it may not be the best source of calcium. It only has vitamin D because it's added to it, and that people drink skim milk, which actually may cause more hunger and obesity based on the data we have. So it's definitely not nature's perfect food. We know it may cause increased risk of cancer, causes increased risk of type 1 diabetes, autoimmune diseases. It's linked to asthma and allergies and gut issues and irritable bowel, and number one cause of constipation in kids. It's a very significant issue.
What are your thoughts on organic versus non-organic? Like I said before, I am definitely a qualitarian, and it's something that I will never skimp on. It's like if an organic avocado costs this much and a non-organic one doesn't, like I'm always going to go for the organic because if I have the choice and I can, I'm going to. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I'm on the Environmental Working Group's board, and we identify where are the most contaminated foods, what are the best, both in terms of fish, meat, and also produce. And, we know there's a lot of the foods we're eating are highly contaminated. For example, strawberries that are not organic have huge amounts of pesticides on them. They're the number one most contaminated. And there's others that may not be so bad that you can eat that are not organic. So I think it's really important for people to understand it's really okay, in some cases, not to eat organic, but for most part, we really do need to.
So, Mark, is there anything else we're missing? Like for people listening and they want to get started, they want to start making some subtle shifts besides reading your book, which we'll link to in the show notes and everyone can go and grab because it's such an amazing resource. And I think it's a book that every single human being needs to read. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to mention? I really want people to be armed with all of the knowledge so that they can go out there and start making the best and healthiest choices for themselves and their family.
I think it's important for people to realize that it's not that complicated, that, there are so many competing camps out there: vegan, paleo, keto, low fat, low carb, high carb. I mean, there's so many different approaches to eating. And when you sort of pair out all the sort of the noise, you look at what are the principles of eating healthy that everybody should be aware of, that everybody pretty much agrees on. And then within that, there's a fair bit of flexibility. And I think I talk about the 12 principles of a pegan diet. And essentially, they're the things I mentioned before. It's eating a plant-rich diet, not necessarily plant-based, but 50 to 70% of your plate should be vegetables. So tonight, I'm having some grass-fed ribeye steak, not a big portion, a small portion. I'm having roasted mushrooms. I'm having snap peas, and we're having fresh zucchini for the summer. So I'm having like 3 vegetable dishes with a little protein as a side dish. And I think that's really what we should be focused on. And for lunch, for example, I had a watercress salad with fresh summer tomatoes because it's summer here, avocados. I had watermelon radishes. I throw some pumpkin seeds on there and olive oil, vinegar, salt, and pepper. Delicious, amazing lunch. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, but we should be eating, at least, they say 5 to 9 servings. I think we should be eating probably up to 10 cups of vegetables a day, which is a lot. But I like to see people eat more, which is, almost twice as much as 9 servings, right? It's a half a cup per serving. People should know that fats are not bad, that we need good quality fats in our diet. Olive oil, avocado oil, nuts and seeds, that we need, even grass-fed ghee can be okay. We need coconut oil. All those are fine to eat. We need to also realize that we should be eating good quality nuts and seeds as a good part of our diet, because there's tons of evidence that they help prevent disease. We should be eating a low glycemic diet, which is low in starch and sugar. We should be eating a diet that's avoiding non-food substances that are, 3 to 5 pounds of chemicals we eat every year in our food, including additives and pesticides and artificial sweeteners. These are not benign substances. So if we're eating animal foods, we should eat foods that are sustainably raised or regeneratively raised, that we should be harvesting fish in ways that are sustainable and growing fish in fish farms that are environmentally sound, as well as, promote healthy fish as opposed to not. We should be eating foods that are just generally real whole food, that are very few steps from the field to the fork. These are just simple principles that everybody really can follow, that are going to make a huge difference in terms of what they're doing. And the pegan concept it's kind of a joke. It was just to set down what are the principles of healthy eating across the spectrum of all diets.